Well, hi there, I'm Sarah Glanfield. I'm a business and marketing strategist just for boutique fitness studio owners like you. If you're ready to be inspired and make a bigger impact, you're in the right place. All you need are a few key strategies, the right mindset, and some support along the way. Join me as I share the real-life insights that will help you grow a sustainable and profitable studio. This is the Pilates Business Podcast. Welcome back to the Pilates Business Podcast. I'm Sarah. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm here with John Riccitello, owner of Gratz Pilates. He and his wife, Elizabeth, purchased Gratz last year. And I have been desperate to get John on the show to talk a little bit more and share with us what Gratz has been up to and why he purchased the company last year. So John, welcome. It's been a pleasure to get to know you over the last few months.
Well, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me, Sarah.
And it's been fantastic as someone who has been, a part of the Gratz community since I first started teaching and actually even doing Pilates way back in 2006, 2007 in New York City. Gratz is all I've really worked on throughout the years. And so it's been great to watch firsthand as you've really sort of taken the reins of the company and also see a lot of the studio owners that I work with get really excited about the new energy and commitment to the communities. And I'm sure that it has kept you busy this last few months.
I would say that that's very true. Elizabeth and I acquired Gratz last June. We've been putting on, this is crazy to say, a 60-hour weeks. It's where I want to be.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Sometimes I try to leave the office at 6:30 or 7 and Elizabeth's downstairs packing parts.
Right.
So we do everything from, figuring out where we should be to dealing with customers, to packing parts and everything in between. We're working hard for the last year, and that's why we're here, and we both love it.
That's great. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you and when you first discovered classical Pilates and what really kind of drew you in to that method?
Without carbon dating myself, it goes back decades. Mine is a common story among people that practice Pilates. I've had one of those ski accidents that you put on television, you wonder if we survived. And I did. I'm a big skier, and I still ski a lot. And what happened was that I took a back tumble, and I ended up cracking a couple lower vertebrae throughout the and hurting my disc. And while I recovered from that, okay, and having my surgical operation, I had sciatica so bad I could barely finish a grocery shop. So it was painful and difficult, and I tried a number of things to address it, including taking advice from a great surgeon and what they could do for me with a very aggressive surgery, and they told me that they weren't sure that it was actually going to work. The surgeon then was smart enough to suggest that I could get my core stronger. Perhaps that would address the issue. And so I started searching for the right things. Initially, I did try Pilates before I met a woman named Alicia Doyle in San Francisco now. Alicia Stone, she's been married. She was my first classical instructor. And while it was painful for the first several sessions, I quickly became addicted. This is nearly 2 decades ago. And at times I was starting more than 7 days a week. Sometimes I had a session at 7 or so. And for me, from barely being able to walk the grocery shopping, within a couple years I ran my first marathon. So,
wow.
I'm not much of a runner, so that's a very big deal.
Yeah.
And so I kind of did it to prove that I could. But I've been practicing classical Pilates consistently since then. A little bit during COVID. My instructor left San Francisco, moved to Seattle. I couldn't get anybody face to face, and so it was a bit of a opportunity for my time, but never did the best. I'm back to training regularly, at least 3 days a week.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, the thing that gets in the way of training more than 3 days a week is the company.
Right.
Because it's very consuming for Elizabeth and I. We're just super busy with that. But so that's really the story. And for what it's worth, it's surprising to imagine that following an injury like that, it wasn't the doctors that fixed me, it was the bodies that fixed me.
Yeah.
It made me stronger than I was before. And I'm really dedicated to Pilates being a central part of my life.
Yeah. Yeah. Welcome to the club, I think, is and everyone listening is, yeah, it is amazing to hear stories like yours and how powerful this movement practice really is. And sometimes I think as teachers, we often forget the impact of this work. And so I'm glad you shared your story, because it does begin a journey of, for so many, of so much more than just what happens in the studio on the equipment. So yeah, for sure. Thank you for sharing that. So you didn't just fall in love with classical Pilates. So you went all in and bought the company that builds the equipment. So what was it that sort of led you to that point and make that decision? Can you share a little bit about that?
I've been teaching this for a few years now. One of the things that I've done, really since I discovered some Pilates for me, was build home studios. I'm lucky enough to have space to have a gym. My gym, going back for a very long time, looks sort of like a glass room. It's what I originally learned on in love with. And when I traveled the world and found out virtually every Pilates manufacturer's apparatus, the feel is different. The sense of, for me, comfort, the ability to get deep into my core. There's something about Gratz apparatus that I think, and I can probably define it for if you'd like to. And this works better for a true practitioner, Joseph Pilates, classical Pilates, getting deep into the core and they emphasize it. The way we want to begin. And so, a little bit when I found ourselves making a new home and rebuilding a studio in 2022, and we put it in order for essentially the whole complement of separates. And we were patiently waiting for it. They told us it'd be 40 weeks, which, okay, that's too long, but we'll wait. At 40 weeks, they never got back to us, and we reached out to where they're planning for us, and they said it'd be 20 more weeks. At 60 weeks, we reached out again, and they said they weren't sure when it was going to come. To a number of machinations and a few phone calls, we're on the East Coast anyway. We ended up visiting with David Rosencrantz and his team at the factory in Philadelphia. And we're actually looking for order. What I could see was something both magical and difficult. The magic was the company is still making the apparatus exactly as they did when they started building Gratz apparatus. The same durable construction, the same great design, the same great engineering. So many of the other things in the business weren't working. They couldn't produce enough. They didn't have a strong enough relationship with their vendors. They didn't have a very measurable customer support team and no tools and no ERP system. It's a difficult situation. The company that wasn't long for this world. So I think I gave some serious thought. And we both love classical Pilates in a way that I think many of your listeners would, but it's really important to us. And we have a deep affection for Gratz, and with that, we can't let this company fail. So we stepped in and became the new owners last year. I have to say, it might be a little easier than it's turned out to be, but so far it's been super challenging for both of us, rewarding for both of us. Really, the point was a simple one. We love classical. We love Gratz Pilates, not apparatus. And we wanted this company to thrive and serve the classical instructors around the world in the way they should, not the way they have. And so it was not a dollars ROI equation, although we're not looking forward to taking a financial bath from this, although we have so far. The principal point was we wanted return Gratz to be better than it's ever been before for the Pilates community. So that's what we're after. It's important to it's personal to us.
Yeah, it sounds like it really meaningful and personal to you. And Gratz is a company that's kind of rich in the history of the classical Pilates world, and so it's wonderful to hear that you have got such a deeper purpose and meaning to being at the helm and leading it forward. And I know one of the things that Gratz has really focused on in the past is that craftsmanship, is that quality. Can you talk a little bit about how you continue to maintain that as you're evolving the company in all the different ways that you are today?
So I actually say our mission is not only to maintain it, but to improve it. So um, there's so many things weren't going well for Gratz when we intersected with the company and started acquiring it. One of the things that was great is looking back over history, the company never really got connected to what I would call value engineering. And what I mean by that is company after company, if you look at American manufacturing, if you look at what you find at the grocery store, uh, it seems like they package and repackage and trying to figure out how to take 5% out of one part of it, or make the canopy on the Cadillac just a little bit lighter because why not? You can save $10 per apparatus. This is not sophistication, and the parts have learned sophistication. And so one of the amusing parts of it is, well, I would say, typically, it very much ran like a 1960s wooden metal shop. But it also meant they never embraced what I would describe as sort of modern process of making rush parts and stuff.
Right.
And so it probably contributed in part to their bad state, but they make a very expensive to manufacture set of apparatus. Now, that's the big part. They never screwed with the design. I also can't tell you, from an engineering perspective, why the designs are as good as they are, or what the tolerances should be. And I find, for example, that the batch manufacturer that we get from our spring suppliers, there's too much variance from one set of things to another. And it's a function of the manufacturing process, and we can improve on that and pattern it down so that there's a more consistent delivery for our customers than we've been able to achieve in the past. Or, the measurement on the inside of our drawer, edge to edge, is 22.5 inches. No one ever bothered to say what's reasonable to us. Is it an 8th inch? Is it a 16th inch? Is it 42nd inch? We have a wonderful engineer that's working exactly that issue right now. So there's the variances are tighter, the delivery is, and then when we can find ways to improve something, we're well. And so whenever we do value engineering, we're going to go through quality engineering to keep looking for opportunities to tighten something down to improve its performance. Now, historically, people used to for decades.
Yes.
I know, I train 3 days a week with Amy Berger in Philadelphia, and she's trading on equipment that she got secondhand that is close to 30 years old. It's still great stuff.
Yep.
And it doesn't mean there are no opportunities to tweak on the positive. And so we're going to continue to do that.
Yeah. My reformer that I have sitting just outside this room here is I've had for over 10 years, and it's used multiple times a week. So yes, it is equipment that stands the test of time. And it sounds like you're balancing, staying true to the designs and, what makes the Gratz so Gratz, and also innovating for, what today's world can offer to help maintain that for the foreseeable future. So it's great to hear. Yeah, for sure. So why don't you give us a quick update on, you've been at the helm now for, a few months, and tell us a little bit about what, what people might have see as changed in that time, improvements you've made, things that you've done to perhaps share a little bit about that.
Okay. The first thing that we wanted to tackle was actually the herding conscious to try to find the company to begin with,
Right.
which was lead times.
Yes.
Back to June of last year, June 24, when we completed the transaction, Gratz was averaging about 18 months to deliver it. It was a tough situation because they couldn't deliver any faster than orders were coming in. And so what was happening was it was like a perpetual 18 months. So the thing that went wrong, it was younger. And so, in person, I think that's kind of totally ridiculous. That's just longer than anyone should have to wait. Craftsmanship is one thing, but we weren't so slow because of craftsmanship. We were so slow because we didn't have enough space to manufacture, because we didn't have high quality craftspeople in the business, because we weren't effectively paying our suppliers on time. So when we did need things, we were last in line to get them. And so we came in, and first thing we did was about with suppliers, and so they would deliver to us, and they met them and talked them through what we needed. We also began, and one of the problems of hiring for our rival was that we didn't offer benefits. So it was an hourly wage for people on the floor, but wasn't any health or vision or medical. And so it was very hard to recruit good people because good people have choice. And within 7 or 8 weeks of the company, we put a great health program. Everything from medical vision to disability and all the things you want if you want to work for a great company. So that enabled us to start recruiting. And so we slightly more than tripled the size of our team last year. And regarding leadership in areas we've never had leadership, like operations and engineering and engineering operations and that type of thing. Which allows us to scale intelligently and to do things better on the factory floor. What that's resulted in is, as I mentioned, lots of craftspeople on the wood metal shop, upholstery, assembly, finishing, and with slightly more than almost 4x production. Recently, I said 3, but it's up from that. And what that's enabled us to do is to start to deliver a lot faster. Now, what's amusing is we've done very, very, very little on marketing to sort of drive demand, almost nothing since the acquisition. We've been on a website a little bit. We've done some smart things on SEO and but we're not spending a lot of money. And the community's responding. So the orders are up 3x as well, which makes chasing that faster lead time weirdly harder than it otherwise would be. But we still got lead times from 18 on the largest apparatus to 6, and for the smaller apparatus to 3 months. And our ambition later this year is to bring everything under 3, which I think is reasonable, for someone to plan. It does take several weeks to actually build these things if you continue with the high craft orientation the company has, and we are going to continue with that. So it's been rewarding, but then when you drive the volumes and the orders come in faster, there's so many things that we're having to chase, and we're not yet organized around the systems we need to support our customers in the ways that we truly want to. We have a much better customer service team than we used to have, and they're delightful and knowledgeable and helpful, but they're also buried. And we're in that process now of implementing the first ERP systems and customer relationship management systems, so that we move beyond post-it notes for getting back to customers, which are a little hard to track, to having good systematized data to be able to support our customers the way they deserve.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have to say congratulations, first of all, on, that's a huge accomplishment to bring down that lead time so significantly. And I know I hear firsthand how thrilled studio owners are and teachers are when they discover that actually it's not going to take many, years to get their equipment. And so I really appreciate, I know it's been a lot of work, and you've made a lot of changes in a short period of time, quite radical. Tripling your workforce is a big deal, all right? And so a lot of things. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, she's had a partner like Elizabeth. She drives so much of it. She, for example, the key drive, whether it's the health side, health insurance side, or driving or shipping and many other things on the factory floor. She's as recognized down there as any other people that are on the factory floor.
Yeah, amazing. You make a good team, for sure.
We work hard at it.
Yeah. So you've obviously got some things that you're still you have some aspirations still that you've yet to achieve in terms of some of the things that you would love to see Gratz kind of evolve towards. Can you tell us a little bit more about your kind of the vision that you have for Gratz? Beyond those aspirations and goals that you've set so far.
Sure. I mean, I think I'll not make this a half an hour answer because it could easily be. But one of the things that I care deeply about is we care deeply about is the success of the classical Pilates instructor, in particular those that are in studio. It's a tough business out there, and glad, Karen, for what you do to advise this community because they do need. One of the things we did recently, most recent blog, why classical, and I won't walk through that. You can read it in 10 minutes. It's on your blog. But it talks a lot about why. And we try to bring down the story into something that you can encapsulate in a few minutes, talking to someone versus reading an entire book, which so many of them have done. And why that's important is I think it's a message in there that I think a lot of people could use to their own benefit on their own. If people understand why classical and help people carry out contemporary Pilates and other forms of exercise are doing. So part of it is about really driving home the message that classical Pilates is truly special. And the one thing I think we had hard and blog was not just the people I already know, but the simple exercise is how important the bond is between the student and the teacher.
Mm.
The hands-on connection to a teacher and the opportunity to pursue the mastery of Pilates over years or decades is truly special. So that's one thing that our vision is really about making sure that that's understood in ways that I don't think it has been. And in the absence of messages like that, perhaps has left us really a little bit with the onside contemporary and other things that have come to market. Another part of this is we want to keep solving the thing. Like right now, when most customers outside the United States order from Gratz, it's a miserable situation. Whether you order manufactured goods from almost anybody in the United States, customer in France, we might ship it to a seaport or an airport. They get it through customs. There's all sorts of forms that allow to get it through customs. They typically organize their own shipment from the port to their studios. We want to be able to establish our operations in most of the major markets we support. So they can order it when it shows up in their studio and then pick it up.
Right.
And so we're working very hard on that side of the operation. Another thing that we want to build out is a much better wholesale support. So they can, if they need reupholstery or they need support or they need that can be afforded to them very quickly and easily. And we partner with big firms like Pilates Maintenance and others to do that. But the connection is still difficult and it's still unclear for most studios around the world how they would get what they need. And so part of what we want to do is just make those things better and simpler so that they don't have to worry about my business to set up there.
Right.
We just we deliver. It works. Beyond that, we do want, for most people around the world, when they order us, they don't know a Gratz studio, they have no way of seeing it. And so, if they know a Gratz studio, there's many out there, but not everyone has a direct connection. So, we're working on a lot of different things, like through our studio network, reference points, or if you will, showroom situations. A lot of things that we intend to promote as we move forward. But year one, so June of last year to June of this year, is primarily just people. It's a manufacturing and customer service. And there are many things that will happen after that align to some of the points of vision I just shared.
Wonderful. Exciting times for sure, for sure. Now, as a perhaps as a studio owner who might be listening to this, or a teacher who might be listening to this, who is perhaps in a place where they are thinking about investing in new equipment for their current studio, or opening a studio and investing in equipment, that is, one of the biggest decisions they make is to purchase equipment. It's a big financial outlay. And so, when someone is thinking about a full set Gratz setup for their space, what advice would you give them in terms of timeline, how to think about that investment, and so on?
So, a couple of things. I think it is a big commitment to open a studio, and I have the pleasure just to many times a week to prospective studio owners that are opening their first studio. Every one of those conversations is both eye-opening and delightful for me. And also sometimes it's a little scary if they haven't thought through all the aspects of running a business. And so I'm glad to have your business out there, and your podcast listeners would probably know that seeking advice isn't something to do. But so aside from, planning on, 6 months in complete studio easily, I probably after the 6 months to come. I find a lot of these conversations that I have leave me wishing I had more time to help. A lot of them haven't, they're going to buy, enough hours, for example, to do wax or to teach classes of 3, 4, 5 at one time, and they haven't identified yet who the other pieces are going to be. And frankly, if you're looking at a lead time, that actually takes more time than buying that product from grad school. And more have they thought about where break-even might be for their business in terms of the number of hours they need to train themselves and the number of you instructors that they hire or partner with. And so you asked about sort of how they should think about it. I think about it as a great investment as long as they have a plan. And that plan needs to take into understanding how they're going to do this, what they're going to charge for, how they're going to attract and retain customers. And it's funny when I ask the question of like retaining customers, other than providing a great session, I don't see nothing about it. And there's a lot more to running a business than just offering the program. And so I enjoy the conversations because I think a lot of the prospective studio owners leave those conversations are more worried than might have when they got on. But it sets them sometimes on a journey of asking more questions. So smart people like you that can help them, and talking to their members and really thinking through how this is going to work, how they're going to get their first students, how they're going to retain those students, how they're going to offer a complementary program between individual instructions and duets and group sessions. And frankly, sometimes with that last thing, it's interesting how often I think about reading a reformer or a conversion reformer, and they leave out a lot of small bits and pieces that are so unique to the Pilates world and that will help set them apart. A lot of them are afraid that order things like studio wall units or guillotines, which are so unique to the practice that it actually often ends up being the apparatus that makes people want to come out. So, there's a lot there. I find it exciting to talk to them, and I'm glad you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah, well, and I have to second that. We have conversations here at Spring 3 with people who are looking to open studios, weekly right now. And, the very first question I ask is the same one that you do, which is let's talk through what your goals are, your plan is. What are you thinking about what you want this business to look like? And then let's make sure it's financially viable with that. And, they sit really nicely together. And when you do that, go through that exercise, it is very enlightening, usually for the newer teacher or newer studio owner or teacher, because it really helps to understand where they might be missing some information or hadn't thought through certain things. And, I always like to make sure people are prepared before they make the big decisions and commitments, and make sure they have everything they need to proceed and have that plan in place. And so we look at the numbers, and then we also look at, okay, well, how are you going to get your first 10 clients, 20 clients, depending on their business model and their business, what they want their business to look like. And then we look at, okay, and what are the other best practices that you need to implement in order for you to not be working the same number of hours as you're working, John? So
always, I think there's always a cohesive plan. There's a good studio. Maybe it's part of the home. 20 hours a week, and they want to have another life with their pursuit. Right. They probably don't need high performers for that.
Right.
They're working on their own. Some people are snipping by their business success, and they get there, with a smart company like us, and then they find that there's a lot of what they offer, and they sort of expand it. And I've seen many studios with stories like that. But it's important to think through the goals and have a plan, and that kind of gets them where they can logically begin.
Yeah, it's really important. It's really important. Well, I'm so glad that you're really focused on that as well. And that, we have some collaborations and some more resources coming to the community on all of those things for sure in the pipeline. But as we kind of wrap up this conversation, I really want to say thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. And, I personally, just as a member of this community and someone who is, also just like you, adores the classical Pilates method, believes in it, and, practices every single week. I'm glad that you're at the helm, and I'm excited for where you're going to take Gratz next. So thank you.
And thank you, Sarah, and your listeners out there. Elizabeth and I are in Philadelphia. We're going to help if we can. And until we meet, great rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you guys. So I'm going to link to the show notes in the show notes to, if you want to get connected to Gratz and learn a bit more about what equipment they have available and to offer you, and talk to some of the brand new amazing folks over there if you're interested in learning a bit more about what is possible when it comes to equipping your studio with Gratz. It will all be in the show notes. But thank you so much, John, for joining us. Until next time. Wonderful. If you're listening in and you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a fellow teacher or studio owner who might also benefit from listening in to some of the insights and tips that were shared today. And I really appreciate it if you could go ahead and rate or review this podcast. It would mean so much to me and help to get this out there into our wonderful community.